Does this scholar think that Michael is a dishonest actor? Yes, in fact, he does. He affirms that explicitly. Does he believe that Jake, the Muslim, actually better represented his position than the Christians? Yes, he does. This video, we have to do a further exposing of Michael Jones' inspiring philosophy. If you guys are bored of this topic, if you're bored of me exposing him, I do apologize, but I think it needs to be done. Somebody has to do it. So if you followed the back and forth between my channel and Mike's channel, one thing that you should notice is that almost every single time that I do a refutation video or that I'm speaking about the topic, I'm by myself. Pretty much almost every single time, except for maybe one, where I had a joint video with one other person. But every single time that Michael Jones has to speak about this topic and attempts to respond to my objections regarding the Trinity and regarding the historical development of the doctrine, he has to bring on people like Jay Dyer, William Albrecht, right? This other guy, I forget what his name even was. He went by some strange name. Anyway, all these different people he has to bring on his channel. And now this other guy, Rob, all these different people he has to team up with. Maybe it's because he can't answer my objections alone. That's not necessarily the case, but maybe. But anyway, through the back and forth, I pointed out his dishonesty and how he was dishonestly handling sources. He's quoting from Edgar G. Foster, and he's quoting from a few different people who don't actually agree with his view. And it's not that he just didn't quote one part where they did agree with him, but neglected the rest. He misrepresented their position. And that's what I exposed, his dishonesty, in my recent video. But guess what? One of these scholars that he was misrepresenting, both him and Rob misrepresenting him, actually caught wind of their interview or discussion that they had. And he responded because he's got a blog and he wrote a little blog post. So let's take a look at what this scholar said. Does this scholar think that Michael is a dishonest actor, as the title says? Yes, in fact, he does. He affirms that explicitly. Does he believe that Michael and his buddy Rob misrepresented his scholarship and who he actually is and what he actually wrote and his actual positions? Yes, he believes they misrepresented him. Does he believe that Jake, the Muslim, actually better represented his position than the Christians? Yes, he does. Let's take a look. So here you have it. Here is a blog article, which is from Edgar G. Foster's blog called Foster's Theological Reflections. And you can see here, this is on Sunday, March 17th, 2024. So it's titled, Quick Response Concerning Quotations of Christopher Stead in My Thesis. Because Michael claimed that Edgar G. Foster completely misread or misrepresented Christopher Stead. So he responds to this. He says, I have been accused of mishandling the words of scholar Christopher Stead from his book Divine Substance. This accusation caused me to look at my thesis, his master's thesis, work to see if this charge is true. In my opinion, it is not true. I found 6 occurrences of Stead's name, checked them all, and I find no merit for the accusations. At no time did I say or imply that Stead agreed with my worldview or theology. Those interested can see for themselves. And he puts the link to his thesis. So he's saying explicitly, no, Mike, he didn't misrepresent Stead. Then he says, for example, here is one citation or quotation from my thesis, page 23. And he gives the citation. Then he says, please tell me how this citation gets Stead wrong. Here is another example, page 70 of my thesis. Stead further discerns that Tertullian depicts God as a mind, nous, containing word in the sense of plan or thought within it. Moreover, he further states, quote, this latter is sufficiently distinct to be addressed as a partner in dialogue, close quote. Yet this sermo does not become son until God utters the word, let there be light, as recorded in Genesis 1:3. Stead writes that it is only at this point that one can speak of discourse, sermo, as Son in the fullest sense. It might therefore be inaccurate to argue that Tertullian thinks that the Son is a timeless person, internal besides God, or besides the Father, close quote. Again, these are Foster's words. Again, one has to be careful to distinguish my words and beliefs from those of Stead. I did not conflate the two. I likewise discuss Stead on page 74 of my thesis. For the record, my training is in ecclesiastical history, so I am technically a church historian, which the YouTube video gets wrong, because they claim, see what they did was, initially, that him and Jellybean, or whatever the heck his name was, Michael and Jellybean, they made the claim that they're not aware of any scholar who actually has the same position as Jake that says that Justin Martyr and Tertullian were not Orthodox Trinitarians. Michael then corrects Jellybean, or whatever his name was, and says, well, actually, it's a fringe view that some so-called scholars think that Justin Martyr was not an Orthodox Trinitarian. But then Michael says, he's not aware of any scholar who says that Tertullian was not an Orthodox Trinitarian. Well, I pointed out that in the very same video, he quoted Marion Hiller and Edgar G. Foster, two scholars who actually say just that. So if Michael read those sources, then he would know that those scholars say that Tertullian was not an Orthodox Trinitarian. So it's either one of two things, I said. Either he's reading from these sources and didn't understand their actual position and is misrepresenting them, or he's quoting them and never actually read them. So I don't know what's going on there. Then they came and responded and said, oh, look, Jake thinks he has a gotcha, right? Based on what I just said. But then Michael says, no. What I meant was no scholar of patristics or church history or New Testament studies actually says that. So he tried to qualify what he meant. Oh, not just any scholar. So then he says, actually, Edgar G. Foster is a theologian. Yes, some theologians said that Tertullian was not an Orthodox Trinitarian, but no scholar of church history or patristics or New Testament studies actually said that. And that's who Michael claims that he quoted to support his own position. So he tried to wiggle out of his dishonesty by changing what he actually meant by scholar. So that's what Edgar G. Foster is responding to here. He says that he's not actually a theologian. His training is in ecclesiastical history, so technically he's a church historian. His master's thesis was on Tertullian and his thought, and his PhD thesis was on another church father or church writer prior to the Council of Nicaea. So his actual training and his dissertations are on early church writers and their theology, which is exactly what the whole discussion is about. So you can't get out of that, Mikey. I know you tried to redefine what you said or meant by scholars so that you could get out of your dishonesty, but Edgar G. Foster is correcting you. He's not a theologian. For the record, his training is in ecclesiastical history. He's technically a church historian, which the YouTube video and you, Mikey, get wrong. What about the claim, he says, that Tertullian is a Trinitarian? Did I get Tertullian wrong? I've actually been over this point many times on this blog, but I can cite numerous scholars who fault Tertullian's doctrine for not being fully Trinitarian. Here are some examples. Church historian Gerald Bray writes, in his counterblast to Praxeas, Tertullian comes as near as he could to Trinitarianism, without abandoning his fundamentally monotheistic and, to our minds, Unitarian position. So he says that he's actually a Unitarian. The Father always remained God in a way which did not apply to the other two persons. However much the Father, he means, might share his power and authority with them, meaning the Son and Holy Spirit. See Bray's The Doctrine of God, pages 130 to 131 for the full details. Concerning Tertullian's fuller statement of God's existence prior to the generation of his Son, Harnack, right? He says here, Harnack notes that although perspicuously notes that although the ratio et sermo Dei, existed within God since he thought and spoke inwardly, God the Father was still the only person subsisting prior to the temporal generation of the Son. Harnack, History of Dogma, and he gives the citation. Edmund Fortman also concludes that the preeminent Son of God was generated not from eternity, but before and for creation, and then became a second person, close quote. Antecedent to his generation, however, the Logos was not, quote, clearly and fully personalized, Fortman 111. It therefore seems erroneous to think that the Son was eternally a person besides the Father, besides God the Father. Tertullian makes this point clearer in Against Praxeas chapter 5, and he gives another blog post that he wrote on this issue. His training is actually in church history, and he's quoting numerous church historians and scholars to back up what his position actually is, in contrast to Mikey's position. What is he saying? Yes, Tertullian may use Trinitarian language. He may talk about three persons, one substance, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. He may use some Trinitarian language, but his meaning behind that is not the same. He does not believe that the Son was an eternal person. He believes in, again, what Trent Horn said in the previous video, that the Logos was a sort of attribute within the Father, and then becomes a person, is temporally generated, not eternal generation, which is the Nicene Orthodox position of the 4th century, at a moment in time, and then is sort of the conduit by which God creates. That is not Orthodox Trinitarianism. That is two-stage Logos theology. I'm sorry, buddy. And that's exactly what Foster is saying here. Then he says, by the way, the video, referring to Michael Jones's video with his buddy Rob, by the way, the video criticizes me for citing or quoting Harnack. I guess they've never read much church history where such old guys are quoted, because their claim was, oh, they're quoting old scholarship. Foster is quoting old scholarship like Harnack and these other people. First of all, when they actually wrote is irrelevant. You need to show that there is irrelevance that they wrote 50 years ago or 100 years ago by showing, oh, maybe there's a new manuscript discovery that shows that Justin Martyr or Tertullian actually wrote this other work and there's a new development. If there's no new scholarship in terms of the documents of which they wrote or some huge development in terms of interpretation, then it doesn't matter if they wrote 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 50 years ago, right? And that, I think Edgar G. Foster would agree with that. So you can't just say, oh, they're old guys, so they don't count. You need to show that there's some relevance about why they shouldn't count because they're older scholarship, and the newer scholarship, not just because it's new, actually shows that something which was previously thought was wrong, right? Which they're not doing. So he says, I guess they've never read much church history where such old guys are quoted. Wow, he's really ripping them with that one. Then he says, here is what Mark Smith actually wrote about my thesis, which became a book. See here. And there's an actual book which Mark Smith, or I think an article, which later became a book, he says, from Mark Smith about Foster's thesis on Tertullian. He does not put it down there. Overall, the video doesn't get my thesis. So Rob and Mikey, you didn't even understand what you were reading, even if you did read Foster's thesis. You misrepresented him. You said he was a theologian. He's actually a scholar of church history, right? You don't even know what you're talking about. I don't know if it's complete ignorance or dishonesty, but we'll see here that Foster actually thinks that Mike is a dishonest actor. So here in the comments section, Foster engages with a bunch of different people. He says here, they, meaning referring to Mike and Rob, they said I call Tertullian an Arian in my thesis. Where did I do that? I might have said he posits a subordination of essence between the Father and Son, and I hold to that position now. So Foster believes that the Son, according to Tertullian, is ontologically subordinate to the Father. Most people also don't understand what Tertullian means by substantia, right? Or the Stoic overtones the term has in Tertullian. Where did I say that Tertullian views the Son as Michael the Archangel? Nowhere, he says. Then he goes on further to say, here's a question. Are you surprised by the video? I'm sure your thesis was written a while ago, and now they're talking about it. From what I know, there's this Muslim who wants to argue that Tertullian was not Trinitarian, and I think IP was saying he was. So obviously he responded and cited your book. The Muslim called him out, saying that you thought the opposite. That led, I think, to the video you're talking about now, where they kind of criticize you. Foster responds to that. I was surprised, since my book based on the thesis was published in 2006, and I finished that part of my graduate work before then. It was an odd use of my book by IP. The Muslim was more accurate than IP was. My exact view is that while Tertullian uses Trinitarian language, he subordinates the Son essentially to the Father. I listened to their criticisms, but feel they were way off, hence my reply. You were way off, Mikey. I also pointed out some of the video's incorrect statements where they assert things without documentation. Then again further he says, from what I've been noticing from online Trinitarian apologetics, they want to affirm that all church fathers were Trinitarian. Most I've noticed fall into the word concept fallacy. They'll see a statement, Jesus is God or Jesus is eternal, without really knowing what those words mean in their own context. They assume it's the same meaning as Nicaea. Exactly. Foster says, I've noticed this tendency as well, but the fathers were more subtle and diverse than non-historians think they were. Non-historians like Rob and Michael. See, and then he gives another blog entry from his blog. Sidney H. Malone on Tertullian's subordinate Christology, he gives a quote here. He, Tertullian, has not avoided a subordination, not only in the order of revelation to mankind, but in essential being. Even if we set aside his purely metaphorical illustrations, we find it clearly stated that the Father is the originated principle of the Son and the Spirit, and therefore holds them in relation to them a certain superiority. The Father is wholly essential being, substance. The Son is derived from the whole as part thereof, a portion of the whole, portio. The Father is greater than the Son as one who begets, who sends, who acts, is greater than one who is begotten, who is sent, through whom he acts. Leaders of early Christian thought, and this is Sidney H. Malone. Now, admittedly, I don't follow the literature on Tertullian as closely like I used to do, and to be clear, I acknowledge that Tertullian used Trinitarian language. Of course, he used the terms Father, Son, Holy Spirit. He used the word Trinitas. He used one substance, three persons. However, what did he mean by it? There is also the question of how Montanism affected his theology. I think Trinitarians overlook Tertullian's subordinationism. So he's still clearly affirming that Tertullian was a subordinationist. Okay, somebody else, Roman said, Edgar Foster, I've engaged with this guy in the past before. He's a dishonest actor. I wouldn't engage with him. Then what does Foster say in response to that? Roman, I agree with your assessment of IP. What assessment? That he's a dishonest actor. I agree with Roman. I agree with your assessment of IP on YouTube, and I don't plan to have a long exchange with him. People criticize me all the time, so I don't take that too seriously either. Now then, Roman clarifies, and he actually says, I was speaking about the channel he was on, Sentinel Apologetics, meaning Rob. I haven't had any engagement with IP. I've seen mixed stuff about him, but yeah, I've seen some pretty sloppy stuff from IP as well. Now, Edgar Foster assumed that Roman was actually talking about IP when he called him a dishonest actor. And Foster agreed and said, Roman, I agree with your assessment of IP on YouTube, i.e. that he's a dishonest actor and he doesn't plan to have a sustained engagement with him. So there you have it, Mikey. I'm vindicated once again. Edgar Foster corrects you on his scholarship, that he actually is a scholar of church history. That's where his specialty and training and expertise is in. His master's and PhD theses were written on those topics. He's not actually a trained theologian which you misrepresented him to get out of your initial dishonesty. Then he corrected you on many points, on Stead, on the scholarship, on the claim of his usage of old scholarship, all of these things, and his actual position on Tertullian, which is exactly what I said. He admits that I represented him much more fairly and accurately than you and the Christians did. And then he affirms that you are a dishonest actor, IP. So an actual legitimate scholar is saying that Michael Jones is a dishonest actor, a dishonest apologist. There you have it, folks. I hope you take this to heart, Mikey, and stop playing games, but I assume that you probably won't, and you'll continue lying to yourself and lying to your audience, which is rather unfortunate. With that being said, guys, if you enjoyed this video and would like to see it reach more people, please consider donating at the GoFundMe link, which is pinned at the top of the description of this video. It's the best way to support my channel in terms of donating. And I'm doing this full time now, so I would appreciate it if you guys appreciate my videos. The best way to show your appreciation is donating at that GoFundMe link. Really does help, and I appreciate your support, guys. Also, if you want to help in other ways, please consider subscribing to the channel, sharing these videos, sharing my channel with your friends and family and those that may be interested, or on your social media platforms, no matter how big or how small they are. And at the very least, give this video a like and my other videos a like, and comment on them if you enjoyed them. Really does help with the algorithm. It's unfortunate that we have to do that in order to further these videos and get them to reach more people. But if you do want that to happen, please consider paying your part and doing one or more of the things I just mentioned. With that being said, guys, until next time, inshallah, I'll see you all again then. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.